Metroidvanias, what an absolutely silly genre name. We, as game players, can suss out what the genre is. They're games like Metroid and Castlevania. But imagine telling a non-game player about Metroidvanias. What are you playing? Axiom Verge. Well, what's it like? It's a Metroidvania. It's a what? A Metroidvania. Richard, are you on drugs? Blasphemous II is a Metroidvania. It's a Metroidvania I just finished playing. Yes, sometimes I play non-RPGs, although Metroidvanias do share some DNA with RPGs, especially Blasphemous and Blasphemous II, and this week I'm going to talk all about Blasphemous II. I did a video on the first game, but don't watch it, it is a Richard Dark Ages video. The original Blasphemous hooked me with its visuals, this ultra gory and super intense take on Spanish Catholicism. The hero wears a metal, conical mask / helmet and douses himself with blood in the name of his god. The villains were massive, abstract, and obtuse characters reminiscent of Catholic saints, all done in this crisp and colorful pixel art style. Marry this to the Metroidvania style of exploration, skill progression, and item collecting, add in a dash of Dark Souls-esque difficulty in combat, and you have one hell of a game. I absolutely love Blasphemous. Will I love Blasphemous 2 in the same way? Or will it leave me a dried out husk discarded in a gore-soaked Catholic hell? Let's find out. Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between and beyond, I'm Richard for RPG Fortress, and this is... Wow, Blasphemous 2 is really cool, and I quite enjoy the visuals. Also, the soundtrack is really cool. And is it me, or is the game world a lot larger than the first game? Also, fuck Odon of the Confraternity of Salt. Blasphemous 2 was developed by the Game Kitchen and published by Team 17, you know, the Worms people. The first Blasphemous was a cult hit with its aesthetics of a gory and abstract version of Catholicism viewed through a Spanish lens. While not everyone was on board with some of the more obtuse gameplay decisions, just about everyone could agree the art direction was wild, even though not everyone liked it. The game's producer, David Erosa, wanted the follow-up to be closer to those classic Metroidvanias of the early days. The dev team built completely brand new code for this new version of the game. All the code from the first game was discarded, and they started from scratch. It might not be noticeable to casual viewers, but let me tell you, everything is a lot snappier now. The sequel boasts a number of changes. In the original Blasphemous, the Penitent one was equipped with the Mea Culpa, a large two-handed sword. The Penitent one now has 3 weapons, and I'll do my best here. The Ruega al Alba, a sword, Sarmiento and Cantella, a rapier and dagger, and Veredicto, a big mace / cudgel / holy water dispenser. Traversal skills no longer need to be swapped out. When you unlock double jump, you always have it available. All in all, Blasphemous 2 is a lot gamier than the original. Also of note is the return of composer Carlo Viola. Blasphemous' soundtrack was magnificent, with the soundtrack for Blasphemous 2 being just as good. Viola weaves a host of styles together, including traditional Spanish music, classical, ambient, drone, and even just a little bit of heavy metal. Spanish guitar and metal guitar both involve a lot of tremolo picking. That is, picking one or more strings in a fast rhythm over a more ambient backing track. Blasphemous 2's soundtrack is dark, bleak, and crushing, perfect for trekking through some dungeons and smashing goblin heads. The story of Blasphemous 2 takes place 1,000 years after the first game. The world of Custodia has gone through a time without gods and the miracle's influence. This millennia of silent sorrow gradually led to the residents praying for a greater power to stop the suffering. You know, like real humans in the real world. Gaining power from the prayers and sublimation of the populace, the miracle was able to return. Gathering its power in the sky above, it creates a gigantic heart to power the birth of the son of the miracle, Basically, the Antichrist, or the anti-Antichrist, I guess. For added protection, the Miracle enlists a Dark Souls-esque crew of guardians called the Arch-Confraternity of Penitence. Odon of the Confraternity of Salt, a powerful and armored halberd wielder with power over water. Benedicta of the Endless Orison, a magic user who has mastered levitation and lightning attacks. Orospina the Embroiderer, a rapier wielder who is incredibly fast and nimble. Lesmus, Incorrupt Sacristan, a heavily armored warrior who fights with a child's coffin, okay. And the oldest and strongest of this group, Evaterno, Father of the Penitents. This guy is fast, like wow. This Arch-Confraternity is here to protect the heart in the sky and ensure the son of the Miracle is born. You once again play as the Penitent One. You awaken after 1,000 years of sleep to combat and defeat these new foes and save Custodia from a new age of the Miracle. A new age of suffering. A new age of torment. Guided now by Annunciata, you first head out to collect the 3 regrets. While gathering the regrets, you find that this new threat, the son of the Miracle, was born from a wife and husband praying for a child despite the wife being unable to bear children. Through their pain and suffering, the wife became pregnant with the son of the Miracle in a twisted, immaculate conception. From here on, the heart in the sky appeared, and that is where our story has begun. It's all very heavy metal and sounds like something that King Diamond or Slayer would write an album about. This story is pretty cool, but I feel like its explanation is a little bit hazy during gameplay. I only really got it after the fact, reading multiple synopsises about this game's story. Maybe on a second playthrough I would have gotten it, but who has time to replay games with 45 Trails games that need to be finished? Also, I guess that's kind of in the Dark Souls style to not 100% explain the game, so this is a me issue, I guess. The gameplay in Blasphemous II is pretty solid. Like I said earlier, the devs completely rebuilt the game's engine from scratch, so while it kinda looks and kinda plays like the first game, it's just different enough. And everything they could have fixed, they did. Even falling into spikes. Remember falling into spikes in the first game? That's been fixed. Like any other Metroid, you start off pretty pathetic. Weak, poor combat options, poor traversal options. You are going to struggle. Things are going to be tough for a while, and you're not going to have many options of where you can explore. You know, typical Metroidvania stuff. But you get to choose your starting weapon. That's right, you get to choose which of the 3 game's weapons you start with. As mentioned earlier, you can choose between the sword, the rapier and the dagger, and the cudgel. Each weapon has their own strength and weakness, but regardless of which one you choose, you do end up getting the other 2 pretty quickly thereafter. The rapier and dagger are fast, but not very strong. The cudgel is very strong, but slow, and the sword is just a sword. You can swap out to the other weapons, and you'll need to get used to it because not only are the weapons all viable combat options, they all have their own little skill that operates puzzles. The sword's downward attack can destroy roots that block your path, the cudgel is used to strike bells that create temporary platforms, and the rapier and dagger are used to strike mirrors, which transform you into a beam of light and transports you a short distance away. To which I say, what the actual fuck? As you traverse the world map, you'll explore new areas, fight baddies, and collect things. Like the first game, there are lots of NPCs to engage with and who want items from you. A lot of these NPCs don't have names, which is kind of weird, so I guess I need to refer to them by what they do. Like the woman you give empty bile flasks to, she's the bile flask woman. She's a woman, and you give her empty bile flasks, which she turns into usable bile flasks. You can also give her chalices, which increase your maximum health, and you can give her crystal shards, which increase the amount of health the flasks heal. She's also 20 feet tall and has a host of cherubim who slowly peel her skin away until she's just a muscle-covered skeleton. Fuck. You will eventually meet a sculptor in town who will allow you to unlock an altar that you can carry around with altar pieces, and these pieces grant you various bonuses and resistances. You can collect pieces and unlock more slots as the game moves forward, and you'll eventually unlock 8 slots. 8. That's a lot of slots. Like the original game, you'll be able to collect rosary knots that yet another NPC will use to increase your rosary slots. In these slots, you can set rosary beads, which, like the altar pieces, will give you various bonuses and resistances. And you can eventually have 5 rosary bead slots. So that's 13 customizable slots between the altar pieces and the rosary beads. And there's loads of both to collect. Things are scattered all over the map. There is so much to collect that you will constantly be bumping into new things. As you continue on your adventure, smashing goblins or whatever, you will eventually find some weapon-enhancing shrines that make your weapons much stronger. Each weapon has 3 levels and several purchasable skills for each. You can use your marks of martyrdom to purchase upgrades like this weapon does a bit more damage, and you now have access to this attack skill. And once again, you are going to be using all 3 weapons, so you will need to update all 3 weapons. The last thing I had to do was scour the map for more marks of martyrdom and tears of atonement. There are loads of things to collect, but these 2 types of currency were harder to get. Thankfully, I found a small part of the map where grinding for tears was easy, although marks were much harder to find, resulting in me needing to find a map online. Combat is fun. Lots of enemies with varying weaknesses and attack styles, leading you to spending a bit of time with each enemy, getting to know their mechanics. You can occasionally do a finishing a move on enemies, but the chance doesn't really appear until they're 1 or 2 hits away from dying anyway, so they're not really that helpful. They might generate a few more tears though, so I guess that's something. Bosses are wild. But of course they are. They're the big connection to Souls-likes. There are loads of them to fight, and most of them are pretty good and pretty difficult. A couple are great. Some are okay. A lot of them are okay. They are fun enough to fight against, but this is part of my main criticism of the game, the art direction, and especially the bosses are a step down from the previous game. The bosses are usually multi-phased with loads of attacks. Each attack has a tell so you know when to and when to not attack. Most bosses will take several attempts to decipher, and when you do decipher those attacks and manage to kill them, it is a great feeling. That Souls-like push-pull of boss fights is great, and that's not what I'm talking about when I say I have a main criticism with the bosses. I want to make that clear. The fights and difficulty are both great. The art direction of Blasphemous II is a lot more safe than the first game. There is less blood, there is less gore, there is less burned flesh, there is less impaled meat. You've got some cool characters. The Archconfraternity is cool. They are kind of like bad guy versions of the Penitent One. They're to the Penitent One what the Robot Masters are to Mega Man. The first Blasphemous had huge, grotesque monsters, all very human in appearance, but they were towering, malevolent, twisted things. Our Lady of the Charred Visage was a gargantuan, malformed woman with molten gold burning her face. A huge portion of her skull was melted away with brain visible. Exposito, a 20-foot tall baby, a crown of thorns, a bandage over his eyes, soaked with blood and dripping, with a cruel-looking, emaciated monster holding him aloft while you fight a giant snake with a pale human face. Ungodly terrors. A reflection of darkest Catholicism with the veil pulled away. Even the helpful NPCs in Blasphemous were incredibly insane monsters. The Lady of the Six Sorrows is here to increase your health whenever you find her, but she is a giant, floating, half-naked woman with 6 swords piercing her heart, blood flowing down her body to the floor below. Jibrail, a poor man bent and broken, his spine twisted and forcing him to stand face down in wretched pain. Deogracius, his body and limbs wrapped tight in thick cord, causing him to constantly be in pain. Gemino, locked inside a metal statue atop a snow-capped mountain, the cold stinging his body for all time. The world of Custodia in Blasphemous is one racked in eternal torment. Every single person, good or bad, suffering in the name of the miracle. Blood, gore, suffering, agony, pain, torment. The first Blasphemous felt like you were in a world that truly knows agonized pain. Blasphemous 2, for the most part, is a lot more tame. Most of the bosses are boiled down to Ivaterno's henchmen, kinda dressed like the penitent one. The art direction seems a lot more tame this time around, and for me, the world feels a lot less heavy. But you can still enjoy Blasphemous 2 with the toned down art. In fact, a lot of people might enjoy it more. The gameplay of Blasphemous 2 is much better than the first game. Combat is tightened, traversal is easier, falling on spikes isn't an insta-kill. It plays a lot better than the first game. Not everyone likes gore. Not everyone likes perverted depictions of Catholicism. The people who like Metroidvanias but who might be a bit more squeamish might skip the first game and go right on to the second one, cause the visuals aren't quite as dark, and that's cool. But for me, I think toning down the gore and the blood and the religious perversion is a big mistake. All in all, I think that both Blasphemous games are 100% viable and should be played back to back. Even in its toned down state, possibly due to 1,000 years without the miracle, maybe that explains the toned down gore and perversions, Blasphemous 2 is a hell of a play, and I am looking forward to potential future DLC to expand the story. I'd love an excuse to jump back into this game. I went into Blasphemous 2 expecting a watered-down sequel. The first game, while good, definitely had its problems. I knew the art in the sequel was going to be tamed down just a bit just by watching the previews. I was hoping that the gameplay was going to be a bit more on the level. I was hoping for an okay game, but by the time I killed the first boss, I knew I was going to be having a great time with this game, and I did have a really great time. The improvements over Blasphemous just make it a much more thrilling experience. Combat is a lot tighter with lots more options thanks to the added weapons. The map itself feels a lot more organic and fun to explore. There's just so much to collect that you will be running around all over the place. The art direction, admittedly, it bums me out a bit, but this is a me issue. Toning down the violence and gore and bizarro religious parody will probably shift more units. Not everyone is going to be into all of that, so better for them, I guess. I would have loved to have seen something just as twisted as the first game, but I can live without it because I know the game is so good. Blasphemous 2 is well worth a play if you are into those silly named Metroidvanias. And that is another video in the can. It was nice to play something a bit more action-oriented this time around. And my next game is also going to be a bit action-oriented as well. Ooh, breaking the rules. I hope you all enjoyed watching the video, and thank you very much for doing so. Have any of you played Blasphemous or Blasphemous 2? If not, have you played any other Metroidvania? Something tells me a lot of you have probably played Super Metroid. Leave me a comment below if you have. I'd love to hear your thoughts about your favorite action-adventure platformer with measured traversal mechanics and light RPG elements. It is now the time where I asked you to do the YouTube stuff. Feel free to not do any of this. Just watching the video is more than enough, so thank you. But if you are so inclined, please like the video, share, subscribe, ring the bell, check out our Discord, check out our Patreon, buy a shirt, buy an album. I have just released a cool new album that is not so secretly based on Chainsaw Man. If you like blackened death metal, hit it up in the link below. For RPG Fortress, my name is Richard, thank you for watching, see you next time, and don't forget to hug a cat. Goodbye.